for Liberals. Carney falls short by 4 votes in stunning recount. Poilievre returns. It all came down to just 4 ballots. 4 votes that flipped what was expected to be a triumphant entry into Parliament for Liberal heavyweight Mark Carney into a humbling political defeat. In Windsor, Tecumseh, a battleground riding long considered safe Liberal territory, Conservative candidate Cathy Borelli narrowly edged out the former central banker after a court-supervised recount. The result wasn't just surprising. It sent a political jolt through the Liberal establishment, shaking confidence in the party's future and raising serious questions about Carney's political viability. For the man once touted as the Liberals' next great hope, this wasn't just a missed opportunity. It was a thunderclap of rejection from voters he thought he had in the bag. Mark Carney entered politics not as a grassroots candidate, but as an institution. Armed with a resume that included stints at the helm of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, he brought globalist credentials and elite economic pedigree. Liberal strategists assumed that pedigree would translate into votes, positioning him as a technocrat who could inject credibility and vision into a faltering brand. But that assumption quickly crumbled. Voters in Windsor weren't looking for another keynote speaker from Davos. They wanted someone who understood what inflation was doing to their rent, what grocery prices were doing to their families, and what high interest rates meant for their mortgages. Carney's campaign speeches were heavy on climate metrics and fiscal frameworks, but light on empathy or practical solutions. What made this loss even more remarkable was the nature of the recount. It wasn't a partisan exercise. It was conducted under judicial oversight, led by Ross McFarland, a figure well-connected in Ottawa's Liberal corridors. And yet, despite every procedural safeguard and every advantage of name recognition, Carney still came up short. The post-mortem quickly focused on mail-in ballots, which were once considered a Liberal stronghold. Irregularities, mismatched entries, and validation issues didn't suggest fraud, but they did raise concerns about administrative integrity and whether too much confidence had been placed in the process. This wasn't just a recount. It was an unraveling of the narrative that the system always favors the Liberals. Meanwhile, Pierre Poilievre is making a dramatic return. Despite losing his seat in Carleton, the Conservative leader has remained active, appearing at campaign stops across Canada and preparing to contest a safe seat in Alberta's Battle River, Crowfoot riding. Damien Correc, the current MP, has stepped aside to clear the path. For Poilievre, the Windsor result is vindication of his message. While Carney was delivering speeches on climate capitalism, Poilievre was walking through grocery stores, pointing to the price of milk, talking to workers on night shifts, and addressing families who feel suffocated by government overreach. He represents not just opposition, but a contrast in tone, style, and substance. The political momentum is now squarely behind the Conservatives, who surged in multiple ridings during the last election and posted their strongest national vote share in decades. This wasn't a flash in the pan. It was the culmination of years of grassroots work, digital outreach, and targeted messaging on cost-of-living issues. The Liberal message, once centered on sunny ways and progressive unity, now feels stale, disconnected, and top-down. Carney's loss is symbolic of that wider disconnection. His failure to break through wasn't just personal, it reflected a broader Liberal failure to read the room. In Alberta, Premier Danielle Smith has added fuel to the fire, positioning her government as the tip of the spear against federal Liberal authority. Her legislation asserting provincial autonomy on energy, emissions, and taxation has gained national attention. To her supporters, Smith represents a necessary check on Ottawa's reach. The Windsor result will only strengthen her hand, reinforcing the narrative that Ottawa elites are out of touch. As regional divides widen and frustrations mount, Smith's playbook is becoming a blueprint for resistance, not just for Alberta, but for any province weary of centralized decision-making. Back in Parliament, the mood is tense. The Liberals' majority was hanging by a thread, and with Carney's loss, their ability to control legislative outcomes is more precarious than ever. Every bill will now face tougher scrutiny. The Bloc Québécois is emboldened, the Conservatives are energized, and even the NDP, who had previously cooperated with the Liberals under a supply and confidence agreement, are signaling a pivot. Jagmeet Singh has been unusually quiet, likely calculating whether continuing to prop up a faltering government is worth the backlash from his base. Carney's supporters are now left wondering whether he can bounce back. His policy brain is undeniable. He's articulate, informed, and internationally respected. But in a country reeling from inflation and affordability crises, voters aren't asking for theory. They want someone who shows up, listens, and fixes problems. Carney's biggest weakness may not be his background, but his inability to translate it into emotional resonance. Canadians aren't interested in hearing about bond yield curves when they can't afford baby formula. Poilievre, by contrast, has perfected the art of turning anger into momentum. His message is simple: government is broken, and only he can fix it. Whether talking about digital ID concerns, food prices, or housing unaffordability, he channels frustration into action. Critics say he oversimplifies. Supporters say he connects. And now, with a key victory in Windsor, Tecumseh, his movement has tangible results to point to. The recount has sparked renewed calls for electoral reform, not just in voting methods, but in voter education, ballot tracking, and validation standards. Canadians have been shaken by the idea that a few procedural flaws could derail public trust. While there's no evidence of fraud, the close margins have made it clear that our democracy is only as strong as the systems that support it. Transparency and accountability will be the next battlegrounds. Online, this story has taken off. Political influencers, podcasters, and grassroots organizers are dissecting every angle. The 4-vote margin has become a meme, a symbol, and a rallying cry. In chat groups and community forums, voters are reminded that every ballot matters. It's no longer hyperbole to say that a single trip to the polling booth can change the course of the nation. And change may be coming sooner than expected. With a possible by-election for Poilievre on the horizon and a weakened Liberal majority, Canada's political balance could shift dramatically in the months ahead. What started as a recount in one riding has turned into a referendum on leadership, credibility, and connection. The Liberals are on the defensive. The Conservatives are on the march. And Mark Carney, once thought to be Canada's next Prime Minister, is left to reckon with a humbling lesson: the people decide, not the resume.